Welcome to the Black Heart Red Spade podcast. This podcast features long-form conversations with accomplished guests from across the globe on topics ranging from financial markets and trading to psychology, entrepreneurship, and life in general, with your host, Adrian Alberts. Derivatives trading carries significant risk of capital losses and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not indicative of future results. All views aired by participants are their own and intended for informative and educational purposes only. Always consult with a registered financial or legal advisor before acting on any topics discussed. Today I have a very special guest on, Simon Rhee, who is the author of the book called The Tao of Trading. He has been a trader for 28 years, if I recall correctly. And he worked at Goldman Sachs, where he set up one of the main desks in Sydney. Started out his career as a futures broker back in 1992, and that's a long career. It's longer than what I've been trading myself. But it's good to have you on, Simon, and welcome to the show. Glad to finally.
Thanks, Adrian. Great to be here.
So, how about you tell us how you got into trading? I mean, all of us have a story, so I would like to hear about yours.
It's something that I was interested in really since I was a teenager at school. So I was in my second last year of high school during the 87 stock market crash. And I had an economics teacher at the time who was very passionate about markets. And I really picked up off his enthusiasm and just found the whole episode riveting, transfixing. Obviously, I didn't have any money invested at the time, but I guess that was when I first got bitten, I guess, by financial markets. Even as a teenager, I used to love flipping to the back pages of the newspaper and looking up the share price tables. And I don't really know why. It just somehow gave me a bit of a buzz. And so I sort of decided that that was what I wanted to do. And I studied economics and finance at university. Graduated there in 1991, which was sort of in the depths of a recession at the time. Unemployment was sort of north of 10%, but was fortunate enough to get a job, working as a futures broker, where I learned a lot about derivatives and forward curves and contango and backwardation and all the rest of it. And the movie Trading Places was also
Awesome
fairly
movie.
influential there as well. Fantastic movie. And so really, I guess my career just kind of built from there. I went from futures broking to, I worked as a corporate credit analyst for 3.5 years at a major corporate bank in Australia. And, learned how to build cash flow models and pick apart balance sheets. And then 1996, I joined Goldman. And sort of that's where I really built my career in finance over the next 14 years, which culminated in me founding the markets desk in Sydney for Australasia in 2005. And then in 2010, I got headhunted by Citibank in Singapore and moved up there to try something different.
How was the move for you? I mean, the transition from being based in Australia to Singapore, did you notice any difference in the way people trade and how they trade, or was it quite similar?
I found Singapore more plugged in globally. Australia can be fairly, well, I mean, Australia is geographically isolated, and I think there can be people talk about the home bias, that they tend to invest in their own stock market.
Yeah.
I think that's way more prevalent in Australia. Singapore investors seem to be, I think, far more plugged into the global community and just a lot more aware of what's going on globally, and the sorts of conversations you have tend to be less parochial.
Yeah, I think the same can be said about South Africans too. I mean, most people over here love to invest in the JSE, and that's their entire financial universe. So I think we share a few similarities with our Aussie compatriots, even though there's always
a love of cricket and rugby. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I mean, there's always a rivalry in the cricket and the rugby and all that. But we actually have a lot of similarities between ourselves. I think if we look past our rivalries, because of the fact that we are New World people, but I think that also creates that home bias, as you said, due to isolation, because South Africa is also a geographically isolated country. So maybe that's where some similarities come out that you mentioned.
Yeah, good point.
But yeah,
if you look at markets, I mean, I said this to Rocco, Rocco, our mutual friend Rocco Stratum. I said this to him the other day, that I think that if you trade markets, you almost have to be like a philosopher, because you're constantly philosophizing about what are the markets going to do, what have they done, what are these players likely to do, how do I handle myself whenever I trade markets? And it interestingly ties in with the title of your book, The Tao of Trading. And I mean, Tao is I think it means the way. It's similar to
That's right.
Do, like Bushido, the way of the warrior. And you also have to have a bit of a warrior mentality when you are a trader. Do you tell me a bit more about how you got the title for the book, that your martial arts influenced it in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're dead right. I mean, martial arts have been a part of my life for most of my life, and I guess the pinnacle of my martial arts journey so far was becoming a certified Jeet Kune Do instructor. And one of my favorite books of all time is The Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. I've read that book half a dozen times, and it's just the gift that keeps on giving. Every time I read it, I get something new out of it. And yeah, that book was absolutely the inspiration behind the title for my book.
I often use a quote of his whenever I do public speaking events. I start off by saying, what I would like all of you to do is adopt what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is uniquely yours. That's my favorite. That's one of my favorite Bruce Lee quotes. And I think the same applies to markets too. There are so many ways to skin a cat, and there are so many ways to trade and to make money, but you have to find an individual approach to you.
That's very true. And one of the hard parts about markets is when, I may be guilty of this at times, but a lot of people, when they find something that works for them, they become very evangelical about it, and quite dismissive of other approaches. And then the fact is, there are hundreds of different approaches out there that work. It's just about finding one that works for your personality.
Yeah, true. It's like different styles of martial arts. I mean, you get excellent strikers, you get excellent grapplers. I mean, and in striking, you have Muay Thai, you have Taekwondo, karate, boxing, and jiu-jitsu. In grappling, you have jiu-jitsu, the traditional one, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, wrestling. I personally love Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I think it's the one that best resonates with me, but there are other people who absolutely detest the martial arts, that they're not adept grapplers. They prefer striking. So I think the same goes for trading too.
I think you did right. I really loathe these, my martial art is better than your martial art type conversations, because I love all martial arts and they've all got something to offer, and it's just about finding the one that resonates with you. And I think the same could be said for trading styles.
You also do jiu-jitsu, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I've been out of action for a few months, so I've damaged the rotator cuff muscles in my left shoulder, so I'm sort of nursing that at the moment. But
yeah, me too. So both of us are a bit crocked up at the moment. It happens, though. It comes with the territory. But
yeah.
I will say this about jiu-jitsu, though. I've done Muay Thai, I've done a bit of Krav Maga, some MMA and all that stuff, but jiu-jitsu was the one that resonated best with me for whatever particular reason. I think I just knew it. When I started doing it, I thought, oh, okay, this is something different. This is really interesting to me. As in, I knew I could hit very hard or kick very hard, but when I was folded up into a pretzel by someone half my size and had it done so effortlessly, I thought, oh, I want to know more about this. And it's an art that has humbled me. It has shaped me. It has forged me. It actually gave me a lot of mental toughness and emotional toughness too. Don't know if you can, yeah, I'm sure you can say the same about JKD and about the jiu-jitsu that you've done too.
Well, my prelude to, well, my start in martial arts was judo when I was 10.
Awesome.
But since then, since I was, my teens, it was sort of karate, ninjutsu, moved to Muay Thai, boxing, and then discovered, I sort of did Jeet Kune Do, and also did a bit of Sanda, which is Chinese kickboxing.
I never heard of that one.
So I had a pretty good stand-up game, but I had really no ground game at all. And I just felt that this was something that I reluctantly needed to attend to. Swallow the ego and become a white belt all over again and get back in the dojo. And yeah, you're right. It was humbling. And I mean that that first month of just getting smashed every single time. I mean, it was just, I thought, what am I doing here? I was giving lessons, a few months prior. And then all of a sudden, after that first month, you get some new people in and you start practicing on them. And it's like, oh, I actually have learned a thing or two. And yeah, how you sort of, you don't realize how much you've learned until you practice with somebody new. And I just think in martial arts, it's so important to practice with people who are better than you and people who are worse than you. Because you learn from people who are better than you, and you get to practice with the people who perhaps aren't quite as good.
But you bring up an interesting point here. Practice with people who are better than you, and practice on people at times who are worse than you. But this also brings me to, you've also opened up an avenue to a different thing, like in trading, for example. There are few professions that I've encountered where people expect to get good very quickly. It's, oh, I've just done a course in trading, so therefore I must be really, really good right now. But life just doesn't work that way. Why do you think it is that trading has such a, I don't know if I should use the word misconception, but it almost gives people like a false sense of confidence because, well, it can only go up, or well, it can only go down. So how hard can it be? And yet no other profession that I know of brings about that same kind of feeling. I mean, if you look at law, medicine, engineering, people expect you to study for 5, 6, 7 years, and then you practice, and then you become a specialist, and then you become good. But with trading, no, I've done a course and I should be good now. It's weird.
Well, this is the thing, and it's because the barriers to entry is so low. Like anybody with $500 can open an online brokerage account and start punting, and that's exactly what most people do. And I mean, most people don't even take the step of actually doing a course. They'll literally just maybe watch a few YouTube videos, or maybe log into Reddit and just start shooting from the hip. And financial markets are designed to play on your emotions and cause you to do the worst thing at the worst time, unless you're aware of what's going on, both in the markets and in your own emotional state. But yeah, you're right. Nobody buys a scalpel and says, right, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon tomorrow and I'm going to be a bloody good one. They expect to have to do the training. Nobody thinks, right, I'm going to fly a Boeing 747 tomorrow. They expect that they're going to have to do the work and do the training. But so many people approach trading with this lotto ticket type mentality.
Yeah, especially options contracts. I noticed that buying out of the money calls or puts is such a popular way to, I'm going to get so rich once this strike is in the money, and then they realize that I think something like 80% of all options expire out of the money.
Well, that's
so,
right.
So it's a painful lesson, and I think it also creates a false sense of security of, oh well, how bad can it be? I only spend 2 cents on the dollar or 3 cents on the dollar on each of these contracts, but over time you can actually burn your accounts out if you're not careful.
Yeah, because overtrading is another common problem with people who lack the training and experience. Overtrading, revenge trading, chasing moves. These are all very, very common mistakes that aspiring traders make if they haven't got a foundation.
Yeah, it's very similar to being a white belt on the jiu-jitsu mat, for example. I mean, you want to try every single move. If you see an arm bar, you want to go for that arm bar or that knee bar or that choke. But sometimes you're actually being set up to get submitted, especially if you go up against better practitioners. And I've seen that happen to me time and time again in the markets. And that's why I often ask myself whenever I place a trade, is this a good setup, or am I the one being set up by taking this trade?
Great way to approach it. Yeah. It's a good analogy. I mean, yeah, BJJ. I'm not a very good BJJ practitioner.
I'm okay myself.
I'm not very heavy. I've got long limbs. I find it hard to exert the pressure I would like. But I've got a pair of long, pretty strong legs, and so I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to specialize in triangles and taking the back. And if I can't get a submission through one of those two, it's just going to be survival. And as soon as I started to specialize a little bit, my success really picked up.
Oh yeah, And I mean, a triangle seems like a very easy submission to execute. And I mean, in theory it is, but in practice, it can actually be very difficult to lock it in properly and to exert that squeeze on someone, especially if they know how to defend against it.
Yeah.
There was this movie that I watched a few years ago called Never Back Down 2 with a guy called Michael Jai White. And he also mentioned something to one of his students that an angry mind is a narrow mind. And the problem with an angry mind is that you narrow your focus so heavily on what you could do to someone instead of focusing on what can be done to you. And I've had the same thing. You mentioned revenge trading earlier. I think revenge trading is exactly that. An angry mind is a narrow mind. I'm going to have my revenge on this market, and I am going to get a win. But you lose all focus of what could actually happen to you. And I don't think you always realize how vulnerable you are if you do that.
And this is another example of where particularly jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu training is valuable, because there's no other amateur martial art where you go anywhere near as hard. I mean, when you're doing Muay Thai or JKD or karate, the sparring is always done in a controlled, usually at least a semi-compliant manner. You're never going 100%. Whereas on the
train
mats,
the way you fight.
You can go 100%. It's the closest you'll ever get to like a real fight. And the impact that can have on your heart rate and your stress levels when you're not used to it, the first few times you go through it, it leaves you open to self-examination.
Oh no, totally. I totally agree. And you literally train the way you fight. And I think that's exactly what I found too with Muay Thai. I mean, when you get into the ring and you spar hard, I mean, you literally feel those kicks and those punches coming your way. But when you're in, normal class environments and training, it's exactly as you said. It's more compliant. You measure the punches and the kicks, or rather the power behind them that you put into it. But with jiu-jitsu, from day one, you spar exactly as hard as you would train, and it can be very overwhelming. It can be so overwhelming, and the market is like a very, very good black belt that has no patience with you. It has no positive or negative sentiment towards you. It just is what it is. And I think that's what newbies especially forget at times, is that you don't know how vulnerable you are until you actually set foot in the Colosseum and start fighting, for lack of a better word. It's a brutal game, this.
No, I don't disagree at all.
Yeah, but I think that's what martial arts training has done for me, is that it showed me, be humble, be cognizant of what you can do, but also have a strong sense of humility, because no matter how good you get, there's always going to be someone better than you, and there's always going to be an environment that you may not necessarily be able to handle. And I think this bear market, for instance, I mean, I've only been trading for just under 9 years now, and this is my first bear market. So I honestly have to admit that this has not been the best year for me from a performance aspect, but from a learning aspect, I've shot up through the ranks quite hectically. And I think sometimes that's what we also need to accept, is that there will be periods in your trading career where you won't do overly well on paper, but in terms of your actual growth, you might actually be doing pretty damn well. What are your thoughts on that?
Trading is experiential, the same way that jiu-jitsu or swimming or playing golf is experiential. You can read every book written about bear markets and how they trade and how they feel, but until you've actually been through one yourself, it's all theory. You can read every book ever written on swimming, but if you just jump into the pool and try and put it into practice, you're probably going to struggle. So yeah, actually, living through it, I think, is invaluable experience.
I think you would love this one, and yes, feel free to use this quote on Twitter. In theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. And that is by a guy called Yogi Berra, who was a very famous baseball coach.
That's right.
And I think that's exactly what you described over here, is that you don't know what you don't know until you have to do it.
And that's why risk control is paramount. And one little tip I often give to traders who are new or struggling for consistency is don't think of yourself as a trader. Think of yourself as a risk manager, and use that term in all of your self-talk. You know, when you're looking for trades, managing your portfolio, think of yourself, yeah, I'm a risk manager. I'm managing risk. Is this risk acceptable? Can I withstand that loss? Worry about how much you could lose, not how much you think you're going to make.
Yeah, it's like it's like what got us, onto this podcast. In any case, like the other day, you're only one trade away from going broke if you're not careful. You're only one bad fall away from, paralyzing yourself, or you're one accident away from getting badly hurt. Life has got this reverse asymmetry going for it, and I think, trading is no different. It's hardly ever a case of one big trade away. I mean, I've missed some big trades in my career, which could have set me up very well had I taken them. But does that matter? Is that something that I can quantify? Is that something I can work with? No. There's always this what if. What if I did this? What if I did that? But hindsight is 2020, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's missing the big trades isn't what's important. It's missing the trades that wipe you out.
Yes.
I mean, the success in trading boils down to booking small incremental gains over and over and over again, and just completely avoiding big losses.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said now. Survivorship, what's it called? Survivorship bias. I think that's what it's called, where we only hear about the George Soroses and the Ray Dalios and the Paul Tudor Joneses. And, technically the fact that we are still here, we are part of that survivorship bias. But we don't hear the stories of the thousands, even potentially millions of people over the decades who have been wiped out by trading or by any other professions for that matter. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, that's right. You very rarely hear those stories. I mean, I know people post, or that they were in the habit of, posting account snapshots showing how many millions they'd lost on, yellow calls. But the thing is, you got to remember as well with these internet forums is nearly everyone's anonymous, and those types of things can be easily doctored.
Oh yeah, it's also clout chasing in a way. I mean, there's sometimes there's a bit of a victim mentality that I see on Twitter. And I think that's also why I'm very hesitant to, I shouldn't say follow. I mean, I follow a lot of people, but I don't always follow their advice. I try to make my own decisions, make my own mistakes and enjoy my own successes at the same time. I mean, how do you feel about the whole guru? I know you don't consider yourself a guru in any case. I mean, you're someone who provides value. Your courses are very valuable. I've watched your posts. I've checked out your posts on LinkedIn, and everything that you've always said has been sensible. I mean, I've never seen anything where I thought, oh, okay, now you're pushing the guru buttons over here, and that's what I appreciate about you.
Thank you.
You're very practical and sensible about that. But gosh, I'm not going to mention any names, but I've seen so many people on FinTwit and on LinkedIn where I just think, gosh, you are so full of crap. It's actually unbelievable that people are even willing to listen to this.
I mean, you're right. I mean, there are people with massive followings that obviously at best they're really informed, and at worst they're charlatans. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, Twitter, LinkedIn, it's to me it's a bit of fun, and you can make good online friendships and share ideas, and it can be a good sentiment check as well. If I've got an idea and I post it on Twitter and I get absolutely smashed, that's when I know I'm onto something good.
You and me both.
Is the reverse sentiment test. One of the toughest things, though, and getting back to your earlier point about doing your own work, is if you are in a position and then one of the genuinely smart accounts says something completely contrary to what you thought was going to happen or the position you put on, is that internal conflict you can experience of, oh, should I listen to them or should, and really and truly, I think you've got to be able to listen to your own trading style, follow your own trading plan, because if you come out of a trade, whether it's a profit or a loss, and your reason in your trading diary is, or XYZ posted something on Twitter, you're going to feel like a dumbass.
Yeah.
Follow your trading plan.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And to add to your point, I would also say follow your trading plan, but do consult with believable people. If you have an idea and and 5 or 6 different believable people have a contrary opinion, then chances are that you might very well be wrong. So I think that's also an important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. But at the end of the day, a good trading plan will always tell you exactly what you should be doing. If you've written a good trading plan and you follow it, you'll never be guessing. You'll never be feeling uncertain, because your trading plan will tell you, hold the course, move your stop, exit, whatever. And I think that, if you're talking about a technical trade, which is my style, that's probably all you need. If you're looking at, sort of more of a macro theme or a fundamental idea, I think that's where kind of idea sharing can be very fertile.
Oh yeah, true. Because I think technical, as you mentioned, I also like technical, and I use a bit of macro in my own trading style. I find that the macro and technicals don't often line up, but sometimes there can be a wonderful short-term opportunity in the technical arena, where the macro narrative is completely the opposite. Like, for example, what we are seeing in the markets right now. I mean, the market's trending up, even though the macro theme is saying we are in deep trouble, guys. But the market doesn't care about that.
They're always the toughest trades as well, when you're kind of, but if you think about it, right, for much of the past decade plus, as traders, we've all had to master the art of feeling bearish while acting bullish, because the macro conditions, I wouldn't say they've been horrendous the whole time, but there've been a number of periods where they've looked highly questionable, and yet markets have gone up anyway. And so just being able to sort of push that to one side and trade the chart in front of you, I think is a valuable skill.
Yeah, narratives do sell better than facts, and I think it's very easy to get caught up in said narratives, as opposed to doing exactly what you said: trade what is in front of you. Try not to question it too much. You almost have to do the opposite of what your nature wants you to do.
That's so often true in trading, because our instinct is to, you see something moving up and you get a bit of FOMO, fear of missing out, and you want to jump on board and chase a trade that's already well underway, when really and truly you should have probably got set 7 bars ago, and you should be looking to scale out or exit completely by now. And same is true on the way down. You buy at the wrong time, and then the instrument falls, and you start feeling sick about the loss you're making. And when the pain becomes too much to bear, you get to the point where you can't even bear to open up your brokerage account anymore. That's when you bail, just to remove the shame of the loss staring in front of you. And typically that's right when it'll turn and head back up again.
Does that still happen to you every now and again?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said it never happens, but I'm very aware of it now, and I've got trading rules that really keep me on the right side of things.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of your trading plan and your rules. But I think it's great that you as someone who is highly experienced, can admit that I am still susceptible to these things happening. It's
only when I haven't followed my rules, though. Yeah.
Because I read this book by Danny Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow, and he made the incredibly interesting point that even if we are aware of our biases, it doesn't mean that we will never fall for them ever again, or that we'll never be susceptible to their effects. The best that we can hope for is that we are aware of it, and that we will fall for them less frequently than what we would without said awareness.
Yeah, because those sort of biases we have fall under the type 1 thinking, right? The more reactive, instinctual thinking.
Yeah,
whereas the awareness of the biases falls very much into the type 2 thinking. Yeah,
it's quite crazy to think that 80-something% of the time we are operating on that autopilot that you just mentioned. We take a walk in the park, and our minds are constantly processing things. And the unconscious mind is a wonderful odds calculating mechanism. I mean, if we look at how much information we are processing via our unconscious mind versus our conscious minds, it's a staggering difference. I think the ratio is 22,000 to 1. In terms of,
really? Wow,
yeah. So you and I, as we're speaking right now, your conscious you and my conscious you that are engaging with one another, process roughly about 40 to 50 bits of information per second. Your unconscious mind processes anything between 11 and 12 million bits of information per second. So it's
extraordinary.
a staggering difference.
Yeah.
The only problem with the unconscious mind is twofold. It doesn't speak to you in words. And the second thing, it has the emotional maturity of a 5-year-old kid. So that's why we often get stuck with these feelings and things that can actually hamper us. So yeah,
it makes sense. But to your point earlier, it doesn't mean we won't fall victim to them again.
No, definitely not. We are such paradoxes, and I think that's what martial arts has also taught me, is that life is full of paradoxes, including ourselves. You know, we have these incredible neocortexes that can help us think and process and philosophize and all that stuff, and yet we have this incredibly powerful yet primitive and in some ways stupid reptilian brain that is still responsible for so many functions in our bodies. So yeah, it's a constant fight. It literally is a constant fight between what Ray Dalio would say is your higher self and your lower self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's you're right. It is a constant battle, and just having that Viktor Frankl's famous quote, between an action and a response, there is a pause. I'm stuffing the quote up here, but just being aware of that pause and making best use of it rather than just reacting straight away to a stimulus.
Yes, the reaction and response. I actually read something interesting about that. To add to your point, there was this article that came out on LinkedIn a few years ago that was written by this fighter pilot who was often asked the question, how fast do your reflexes need to be? I'm sure you need to have lightning quick reflexes. And he said, no, actually, that's what gets you killed. He said,
wow.
Yeah, he said the interesting thing about quick reflexes is, yes, it helps if you can react quickly. You know, you don't want to be a turtle or a tortoise, but you want to respond rather than react. He said a common misconception is that fighter pilots are literally winging it, for no pun intended, no matter what they do. We all think of Top Gun, Maverick, don't think, just do. And yes, there is an element of that, but pilots, and especially fighter pilots, have a checklist. So like you said about a trading plan, you have a checklist. If a bird strike takes place, what do I do? What do I do during jet wash, in a dogfight, turbulence, whatever? So you know what to do during those particular things. So you have a quick check. So stimulus, pause, response, and that's exactly built onto your point.
Great analogy. Yeah.
So I for instance, I think if I were born in the US, I would have loved to be a fighter pilot. That's absolutely one of my favorite professions to because I always had this thing about Top Gun. Have you seen the latest Top Gun, by the way?
Yeah, I thought it was great.
Awesome movie, isn't it?
Loved it. Yeah.
How do you think it compares to the original one? Or I think they're different, in my opinion.
I think they're different. I mean, I think the original one was it was obviously cheesier, but it was also a bit more fun. I mean, I was only a teenager when it came out, and I loved it. Yeah.
I was barely even there, So I was like 1 year old when Top Gun came out. But you look at you look at how well Tom Cruise has done over the years. I mean, geez, for someone who's, I think he's nearly 60 now, to still be doing his own stunts, he's doing pretty damn well.
Kudos to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I watched Top Gun, I literally felt like a kid in a candy shop, for lack of a better word. And I don't even eat candy per se, but it's this whole feeling. I look at those jets and I just marvel at the precision with which they have been built, and construction, the engineering that goes on behind them, the training that it requires to be a top fighter pilot, but also the support system that you have. I think that's sometimes something that we lack as traders, is that if you don't have a good support system, you will often feel like you are crushed by markets, or rather not necessarily crushed by markets, but that you can't handle it. I find that support system and a good team is really, really, really key to getting through ruts and actually building yourself back up again, which is, for instance, why I'm on a Discord. I also have a few other people that I talk to. I mean, we don't follow each other's trades, but I could go to them and say, hey, man, look, I'm messing up. What do you suggest I do? Can you take a look at my trades? Could you take, something like that? I think feedback is really, really crucial here. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think it can be a lonely environment trading, but I would caution about getting feedback from, rando anonymous online accounts as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to know and trust the people that you're getting feedback from, I think.
Oh, yeah. By the way, when I say get feedback, these are highly believable people I know who've actually done well, and I've seen them, in action. And we don't talk about how much money we made, but we talk about what kind of trade setups we took. We analyzed them beforehand and post-mortem and so on. So that's the kind of feedback that I get. No, fully agree with you. I would not just get.
If you've got that sort of community of people that you know and trust, I think that can be very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also want to talk a bit about other stuff, that we both like. I mean, you mentioned that the other day that you're a big fan of Metallica and Guns N' Roses. That stat on Guns N' Roses shocked me. I didn't realize that stat was actually so prevalent. And Guns N' Roses of all bands, who would have thought?
Well, it was actually not a stat. It was my opinion, to be fair. But
okay.
I mean, Appetite for Destruction. I mean, that album was the soundtrack of my youth, and it's my favorite album. And I think they're one of my favorite bands. It's certainly in my top 10.
Is Appetite of Destruction? I just want to get my bearings correct here. Is that the one with Sweet Child of Mine and Cold November Rain? Was that the Spaghetti? I can't remember the.
No, it's got Sweet Child is on there, but November Rain was on Use Your Illusion 2, I think.
Yeah, Guns N' Roses fan here I'm talking to. But Axl Rose, you look at Axl Rose and his vocal range. I think they said, someone told me a while ago that he has the widest vocal range of all male artists, which is actually quite
right? Okay.
Yeah. Apparently he's got the widest vocal range. Hence one of the reasons why AC/DC asked him to go on their world tour with him when Brian Johnson was out of action due to hearing problems.
I think Axl Rose was a logical choice for that gig.
Yeah. I mean, you're Australian, so I have a biggest appreciation for AC/DC too. That's also one of my absolute favorite bands. I don't know if you like their music or not.
Oh yeah, I love AC/DC. Yeah,
such a cool band. I mean, if you look at albums like Back in Black, that's brilliant. And I think what's his name, Bon Scott. Bon Scott was such a good artist. Pity that he died. But there's one song of his that I keep on listening to over and over again, especially when I'm training, for example, where I need a bit of oomph. Is a song called "It's a Long Way to the Top If You Want to Rock and Roll."
Oh yeah, great track.
And another interesting thing about that is that Brian Johnson has never performed that one out of respect for Bon Johnson. So that song has never been performed live. Yeah, it's never been performed live since Scott died back in the early 80s or late 70s.
Oh, right. Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting bit of trivia.
Yeah, I love this kind of stuff. It's to me that trading is one of my big passions in life, but there are other things that I also find interesting. And I think all of this stuff has an impact on how we are and how we trade to some extent. Maybe not in a quantifiable sense, but it does influence your personality in some way or form. At least in my opinion, it does.
Listening to some good tunes can certainly put you in a better frame of mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you listen to when you're trading? Do you listen to anything?
Yeah, I sometimes do listen to AC/DC. I enjoy a bit of Motley Crue every now and again. I mean, I'm not a super huge Motley Crue fan, but they have the song called "Kickstart My Heart," and it just awesome song. That Metallica, as you know, I mean, I've got a story that I can tell you about Metallica.
Go on.
you know, I was lucky enough, and this was sheer serendipity and sheer chance, nothing that I did that was so great, where I happened to have met Rob Trujillo and Kirk Hammett. And so for those who don't know, Kirk Hammett is the lead guitarist of Metallica, and Rob Trujillo is the bassist who replaced Jason Newsted back in 2001. And wow, Simon, such awesome people. I mean, if I can tell you that they were of the most humble, down-to-earth folks that I've ever come across, I'm not even kidding. Literally zero ego, zero frills or fuss. In fact, Kirk and I had such a nice chat. We didn't even speak about music. We spoke about surfing most of the time because
Cool.
yeah, they're big into surfing.
All right.
And you know, Kirk was hammered, you know, to say the least. So he was actually more interested in talking to one of the waitresses. After all, I'm like, fine, you hang out there, buddy. And then Rob, just out of the nowhere, he initiated a conversation with me. He just said, you have some fine women here in South Africa. And I thought, come on, man, that's so cool. You know, it's so cool that this rock celebrity, you know, he's a globally, well, he's a super famous person. He initiated a conversation with a 21-year-old kid like myself. I mean, he didn't owe me anything. Who was I to him? And yet he was so cool and down to earth and all that. And I think that's what I really appreciate about them. You know, when people have every reason to be arrogant and yet they choose to be humble and cool and kind to other people. That's something I truly appreciate.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, and that's an awesome story you got. What a brush with fame.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I met one of your other compatriots, you know, speaking of cricket earlier, Shane Warne was also someone who absolutely surprised me in terms of how polite and cool he was. Such an awesome guy. It was actually quite sad to hear that he died, you know, because I mean, my brief interaction with him was also like, damn, you know, you literally got such a bad rap for being a person whom you portrayed yourself on the field, but in person, when I met you and engaged with you, you were literally the exact opposites. And I think that's often what happens, you know, with celebrities, is that we form this picture of who they are, but we don't really know who they are. You know,
We don't have a clue. You're right. Yeah. All we get is the persona, and even the persona is not necessarily the one that they want to portray, but the one that the media has fabricated effectively.
Oh yeah, totally. Have you I mean, met any cool people who have also surprised you over the years? I mean, I'm sure you've got quite a few stories that you can tell.
Yeah. Do you remember a band called Extreme?
Yeah, I've heard of them. I can't say I know their music, but I know of them.
I met the guitarist, a guy called Nuno Betancourt, and he used to be married to a lady called Susie Damashi, who was the lead singer of an Aussie band called the Baby Animals.
Yes,
And
I
she
know of
was from
them.
my hometown in Perth, and I met them both in a music store, Concept Music. They used to be in West Perth, and Susie was kind of big, tall, wearing a short skirt, long boots, just very, very confident, very charming. You know, just she made me feel like meeting me was the best thing that had ever happened to her. You know, just very, very charming. And then Nuno, who's this guitar god, he was just this really sweet, quiet guy. You know, he's just like, "Hi, I'm Nuno," and just very unassuming. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome when you have those experiences. I mean, I've met many people over the years, you know, some really cool and some not particularly so. They literally live up to the way that they portray themselves, or very oftentimes you think that they are cool people and then it's actually quite the opposite. But I've just personally found that to me, status isn't what you own. It isn't what you do. It isn't the position you have in life or how much money you have and all that. It's, to me, true status is whether or not people want to hang out with you without any form of incentive from your side or reward from your side, because that to me is true power and status. Don't know if you would agree or not agree with that.
I hadn't thought of it like that, but I like where you're going with it. I think that's a good way to reflect on it.
Yeah.
Status is probably not a word that I use very much. It probably probably has some negative connotations. My initial reaction to the word, because I think of kind of brands and sort of people showing off. But the way you've put it, yeah, I mean that's something to aspire to, man.
Yeah, that's something that I try to aspire to, is, be someone who people want to hang out with, people, someone who's uplifting rather than breaking people down. I don't need to break anyone down to lift myself up. I'm pretty okay as I am. If I can uplift someone else, great. It doesn't take anything away from me, but
No, in fact, it adds. Yeah, it's a good way to live your life.
yeah, and it's not ever even about being esoteric and stuff. I just find that, if I look at social media, for example, how easy it is for people to troll other people and stuff. I said to Rocco and a few other friends of mine the other day, I'm good friends with a guy called Chris Sidiel. You might have heard of him. He's a volatility trader in the States. He's the head of Ambrose Group. So Chris reminds me of you. He's just a younger version of you in so many ways. He's also a big time martial artist. He's huge into his options trading and very well known, but such a humble, cool guy, Simon. I mean, like, really, he embodies that same kind of energy that you do. And that's what I appreciate too, is that, you've got a lot of reason to be arrogant, but you choose not to be. Come on, that to me is true power and true status. If you can be that way, but you choose not to be that way. And Chris was trolled heavily by some other guy, who kept on saying he's a fake and this and that and the other. And I actually made the comments and I said, look, if this person can actually come up to your face and tell you all that stuff, yeah, different story. Good on you for having the guts to do it. But wow, there are many cowards out there who will literally troll you and say nasty things. But if you had to ask them to come and say that to your face, they wouldn't actually do it.
No, they do it
really
under
sad.
an anonymous account. Yeah.
So it's the same kind of thing for me too, is that I'm not willing to go and say negative things about other people, because frankly, I couldn't care less. And I just much rather be uplifting in a world where it's easy to break people down. Just my kind of way of looking at it.
I agree. Going back to martial arts, though, I think that, when you've had another bloke like on top of you, trying to smash you, trying to submit you, trying to tie you up in a pretzel.
Yeah.
A few unkind words on a screen, it's just nothing. It's just water off a duck's back.
Yeah, it is water off a duck's back. And if I said to a friend of mine the other day that, look, if you're getting trolled, you've made it. Well done. You're actually getting attention from people who don't like you, and that's just the world. You'll have people
There's
who
an element
love.
of truth to that. Once your reach gets to a certain size, the haters will come out. I've experienced it, and anybody I know who's been on a similar path has experienced it.
Totally agree, Simon. And that's why, as I said, I appreciate the fact that I can see you're someone who's done the work. You've not only done the work in terms of your own trading, but you've also done the work in terms of your own self-development, whether it's physical development and whether it's mental development. Because I read this book the other day called The Hour Between Dog and Wolf by John Coates. Have you read it by any chance?
No, I haven't actually.
Awesome book. Really, really awesome book. I highly, highly, highly recommend it to you.
Okay.
The
Hour Between Dog and Wolf.
Yeah, the Hour Between Dog and Wolf. So to give you a brief recap without getting boring, without delving into the details, the Hour Between Dog and Wolf is a phrase from 1500s France, where it's that time of day where it's incredibly difficult to discern between a dog and a wolf from a certain distance. Now, I think it's either dusk or it's dawn. It's one of the two, but that's what the French called the hour between dog and wolf. And Coates was he was a trader managing something like $1 billion desk in New York, and he noticed that whenever traders started becoming overconfident and stuff, when they made a lot of money, they would start doing stupid things. So he actually went and became a neurosurgeon. I mean, after that, he studied to become a neurosurgeon, and then he wrote this book.
Oh, wow.
He discovered that testosterone and cortisol have a massive effect on what drives markets, more so than what we would actually like to think and believe. It's a
Oh,
wonderful
I'm going to read
book.
this book now. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's another, reminds me of an old joke. What's the difference between a dog and a fox?
I don't know. Tell me.
Oh, about 6 beers.
That's actually a good one. I think there's a lot of truth to what Coates said. And building onto your joke too, is that testosterone does actually drive markets. Look at bull markets, for example, how easy it is to get addicted to euphoria and also to our testosterone, and inversely with bear markets, where cortisol makes you more risk averse, but you also become more addicted to despair. What are your thoughts on that?
I hadn't thought about it before, but it kind of rings true. It does make sense. I think that it probably underplays the role that female market participants have. But
No,
I
he
guess
mentioned them too.
Okay.
Funny enough, he did actually mention them, and he pointed. It's interesting you mentioned that, because our common perception too is that females don't produce testosterone, or rather, they do produce testosterone, but they produce it by their adrenals and by their ovaries, whether we produce it via our testes and our adrenals. I was not aware of the adrenal production, by the way. I thought it was purely based from our testes, but he said that women produce about 10 or 20% of the testosterone that men do, but you'll often find that women are in certain ways not better traders from being better risk takers, but they're more conservative risk takers. So they're less prone to getting beaten up by the markets in the same way that men do. So that was actually an interesting point
been my experience from observation. Yeah, I concur with that completely.
Yeah, so he actually advocated that maybe what markets need to be more stable is more female participants, which I thought was an interesting perspective.
Oh, it makes sense.
Yeah. I just think that trading might, gosh, I'm going to sound really bad for saying this, but look, certain professions I think fit certain people better than others. I mean, for example, you look at bricklaying, 99% of all men are bricklayers. The majority of soldiers are men. Men are more prone to certain, I think men are more prone to depression than what women are in all that. Women are better in other particular fields. So I think maybe the natural nurturing instinct of women also makes them less prone to want to enter the world of trading. But I've also seen some really good female traders, so it's difficult to say which is which, really.
I mean, financial markets can have a real kind of almost like a gym bro sort of atmosphere. They can be fairly testosterone-y, and it's dog eat dog, and you're going to war every day, and you got to defeat the enemy, and all the rest of it. And all of that may or may not be true, but I actually don't think it's particularly helpful to think of markets in that manner. I mean, the fact is, when you transact with somebody, you've got no idea what their motivations or intent are, what their positions are. This idea that for every winner there's got to be a loser. I mean, it's a very simplified way of thinking of things. I prefer to think of markets really as a river of abundance. You look at the New York Stock Exchange; it turns over what, $500 billion a day. As a trader, all I want to do is dip my hand in that river and just take out a very, very tiny piece for myself.
It is actually true.
I think is a more helpful way of viewing them.
Yeah, totally. That's actually a really positive way of looking at it. In some ways, you actually remind me of one of my favorite characters from a movie called Doctor Strange. I don't know if you watched it by any chance.
I haven't. Is that the one with Benedict Cumberbatch?
That's the one.
That's right.
That's exactly the one. So in some ways, especially, and your book ties into this so beautifully. The character is known as the Ancient One, and I'm not calling you ancient, by the way. I'm talking about the wisdom with which you approach markets. During one of the scenes, Doctor Strange, Cumberbatch's character was training to learn how to do magic, and then he was struggling, and then she said, "You need to surrender." He said, "Wait, so I control it by surrendering?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Well, that doesn't make any sense." And then she said, "Not everything makes sense, nor does it have to." And the other thing that she also said was, "You cannot beat a river into submission. You have to surrender to its current and use its power as your own." And I think that's the same for the markets too.
Yeah, I completely concur with that. Yeah.
And you embody that, just having this conversation with you, and as I said, having read your posts for a while and all that stuff, there's an element of that you also do embody. And your book ties in beautifully to that, the Tao of trading, the way of trading. I mean, Tao, to me, whenever I think of Tao, one symbol comes to mind, and that's the yin yang. It's to me, the yin yang is the ultimate symbol of harmony and focus, of hard and soft, of balance. I mean, even my logo, if you hear in the background, it's inspired by the yin yang. So the whole black heart and the red spade.
I can see that.
Yeah. So I actually got that idea for it.
That's awesome. It's a very cool logo too. Very, very eye-catching.
Thank you. This is actually an idea that I got from a movie called Interstate 60, Episodes of the Road. So it's essentially about a young man who goes into a parallel universe after he made a wish to get an answer to his life. And he wakes up in hospital after a bucket falls on his head, so he's got to do these cognitive tests to see his color perception and stuff. And Christopher Lloyd was the character in this one, performing the test. And he said, "I'm going to hold up, I'm going to show you cards, and you call out the suits, and I'm going to go faster and faster." And then it's like diamond, club, heart, spade, blah, blah, blah. And then he asked him, "Did I pass?" And he said, "No, but few people do." Then he showed him black hearts and red spades. So the initial response of this guy was like, "But that's cheating." Said, experience has conditioned you into thinking that all hearts are red and all spades are black. And based on their size, it's easier for your brain, size and shape, it's easier for your brain to interpret them as being the same than to be open to the idea that they could be different. And that to me was, for instance, why I wanted to create this brand, is like black heart and red spade, see things differently. And I think that it's very difficult to do. It's actually surprisingly difficult to do, don't you think?
Yeah, it's a real struggle. And I mean, most people aren't even kind of conscious of the concept. Even if you're conscious of it, consciously aware of it, it's still very hard to put into practice.
Yeah, it's super difficult to put it into practice. I think that's why trading, life, and all that stuff, it's not really a destination. It's more of a journey. To me, it's definitely more of a journey and a process where you learn things, and you have some shorter destinations along the way, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always take the view that life is not a marathon. It's a series of strategically timed sprints.
I like that.
The thing with trading is like you said earlier, it's a lifelong learning journey. You never stop learning, you never stop improving, you never stop being humbled from time to time. It's great like that because you never get stale.
Yeah, no, you definitely never get stale. Speaking of trading, what's next for you? Have you got any new books lined up, or any exciting projects?
People keep asking me about the next book. Look, writing a book it's a big commitment. Like, it's a big time commitment. It's a decent chunk out of your life. And we've got a young boy who's almost 2, and he's kind of the priority at the moment. So I don't think there'll be a new book within the next couple of years, but I would never say never.
Nah, that's good. I've also looked at writing a book, but yeah, it's surprisingly difficult to do. I mean, I've had drafts that I've tossed out, and then I've tried to rewrite it. Did you also go through something similar? Just so I'm on the right track.
Well, am I allowed to drop the F-bomb on your podcast?
Of course you can. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a famous
freely.
quote from Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
And his advice to anyone writing a book was, if you're going to write a book, write a fucking book.
Yeah.
Because you can't take it back. It's not like a delete that you can go and tweet, and you can't sort of publish a book and go, oh, yeah, I didn't really mean that. So it's something that if you're going to do it, you really do want to put your absolute best effort into it and produce something that you're genuinely proud of. And so I went into my book writing with that front of mind. I'm really going to write the best book that I can. And yeah, it's a work that I'm proud of, and I certainly stand behind. And there's another quote by Michael Crichton, who, he wrote Jurassic Park amongst other things, and he said that the bad news for authors is that books don't get written; they get rewritten. And honestly, writing the first draft in many ways is the easy part, because it's all coming out of you, and then you write it all out, and then you got to read it all. And you sit there reading, going, "Oh my God, I can't believe I wrote this nonsense. Oh God, look at my grammar there. Oh, this doesn't make sense. Oh, this paragraph should be here."
Yeah.
And then you come up with a second draft, and the second draft, yeah, it looks pretty good. Then you do a third draft and a fourth draft, and sort of by the end of the fourth draft, you're so sick of your own writing, you can't believe anyone's ever going to read it. You know what I mean? And then the publisher takes it apart and says, "Well, you could do this, and you didn't do that." And then you get a fifth draft, and then it's sort of in shape. So yeah, I went through basically 5 drafts.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
The first draft, it seems like it's going to be the hardest, but it's certainly the most fun.
Yeah, because you have to write for your audience, not for yourself. And
yes,
that often is the hard part. And I think the same goes for content creation in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I kind of had a customer avatar in mind, if you like, for my book, and I sort of based it on a personal friend of mine, and I thought, well, I'm just going to write a book for him, or someone like him, that they'll be able to find it relatable. But even then, like, the one piece of feedback my publisher gave me that I never would have realized myself was, they said, you're writing this book in 2 different voices. In some parts of the book, you sound very kind of top down and, very official and almost like you're a university lecturer. And then in other parts, you sound very colloquial and informal and like you're having a coffee with a mate. You got to decide how you want to sound, because it sounds like 2 different people writing. But when you write a book, it all sounds like your own voice. It's only somebody who doesn't know you that would really be able to give you that sort of feedback.
That's actually really interesting. And you just reminded me of something else that I actually said, and this is in terms of podcasting. I mean, podcasting is just another form of content creation. To me, it's a form of writing a visual book in a way, except you're doing it in real time while actually talking to someone else. But something that also occurred to me, and this helped me to get over my fear of public speaking, was I was so self-conscious of the sound of my own voice, like really, really self-conscious. Simon, if I heard my voice being played back to me, I would go, no, that can't be me. That definitely cannot be me. Until it dawned upon me one day, was like, wait, buddy, you're the only one who knows that you sound different. If I can put it this way, it's that I'm the only person in the world to whom my voice sounds different. To everyone else, that is my voice. No one knows any different. And so when I had that epiphany, I was like, oh, okay, cool. No one cares. No one's going to know. It's only my own limiting belief that stopped me from doing it. So it just kind of builds onto what you said there, your voice versus someone else's voice.
Very handy realization you had there.
Yeah, but trust me, I still cringe ever so slightly when I hear my own voice. It's like, oh. but it's not nearly as bad as what it was before. I think we get into our own heads way too often. I know that I do, and start creating these demons that don't actually exist in the real world.
That's so true. You spend 99.9% more time thinking about yourself than anyone else does thinking about you. So, yeah.
If you had to classify, your personality type, extroverts, introverts, where would you fall on the spectrum?
I'm both, because I love public speaking. I do feel energized by the company of others. I'm social. I do enjoy, getting out there and socializing and that type of thing. But I do enjoy alone time. I think I probably work better in a quiet environment. I am grateful for time to reflect and work quietly on what I need to do. So I think I'm both.
Yeah, me too. I'm also more of an ambivert. And interestingly enough, I was more introverted as a kid, but then I gradually started to shift towards the middle of the spectrum. So yeah, I can relate. I think it's a malleable process. You don't have to be stuck in a certain at a certain point in the spectrum by saying, "Oh, that's just the way I am." You can adapt and change.
Yeah,
and I think the same.
Sense.
I think the same goes for markets. I read this other book that I finished last night called Alpha Trader by Brent Donnelly. Also an awesome book. And he said something really interesting that I couldn't help but agree with. He said the biggest hampering factor to your success is to say these words: "This is just the way I am." And I thought, damn, that is quite a statement to make. But it's so true, isn't it?
Yeah, it hits home, doesn't it?
It really hits home. And it hit home for me because I thought, damn, how many times have I said that? No, I'm not. I don't want to do that because that's just the way I am, or that's not me. How do you know? How do I truly know?
Exactly. Very hard to prove.
Yeah, it's super hard to prove. Simon, it's been a fantastic conversation with you. I'm so glad that we finally got to have a chat. It's been absolutely spectacular getting to know you and hearing more about your story and what makes you tick. I think we could talk for a hell of a lot longer, considering that.
Oh yeah, we've certainly got a lot of things in common.
Yeah, and I think just the fact that we have so much musical commonality and stuff. I think that's something that binds people a lot, is the type of music that we listen to. There's a lot of truth in that for me. And movies, by the way, favorite movie.
I'm gonna say Pulp Fiction.
Oh my God, you are such a legend. Pulp Fiction is one of the best, absolutely one of the best movies ever.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite one, but the one that comes to mind for me is The Matrix.
Oh yeah, that's a great series too. Yeah.
Did you watch all three of them, or rather, did you watch the fourth one that came out recently?
I watched the fourth one on a plane, and I must confess I fell asleep. It didn't light me up the way the other three did.
Yeah, I think the visual effects were fantastic in the fourth one. I mean, hello, 2021. What do we expect?
Yeah.
But the storyline just left me feeling, okay, is that it? But if you look at the 1999 Matrix, the original one, my gosh, it was ahead of its time, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, and there's this notion of being red pilled. I mean, it's become a everyday saying in the modern vernacular.
I've often had conversations with people who are into Buddhism, for example, and they've actually said that the Matrix is a representation of breaking out of the prison of your own mind, your own belief system and things. I mean, I don't know if you would see any similarities in that, but it did kind of make sense to me.
Yeah, powerful metaphor. Yeah.
Very, very powerful metaphor. So yeah, good taste in movies too, like you even more.
Awesome, Adrian. Well, thanks for having me on. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you too.
Thanks a lot, Simon. And I definitely hope that we can have another conversation sometime down the line. I would always, even if we just do, like a touch up on markets or, check in how your training is going. I hope that shoulder of yours gets better very soon, because that's always a bugger of an injury to deal with. How far and long do you think you need to go before it's fully healed, by the way?
I don't know. It's one of those injuries that every time I think it's fixed, I get back into the gym and it flares up again. So I'm just going to rest it for another 6 weeks, I reckon.
Yeah, maybe go for dry needling if you haven't been for that.
I might give that a go. Yeah, thanks for the tip.
Yeah, I'm actually going to a chiro on Friday to get an adjustment myself. You know, it's amazing how your body actually goes out of adjustment. You know, relatively. I don't want to say quickly, but over time, it actually adds up if you sit incorrectly or train incorrectly. So yeah, I'll let you know how the dry needling went, because I found that actually helped me a lot when I had a shoulder issue a few
Oh,
years
right.
ago. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Sometimes the issue is not your shoulder. It could actually be your lat. So I had a trigger point just here below my shoulder in my lat, and the guy used a needle once, maybe twice, and he sorted the problem permanently. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I'll get onto Google.
yes, definitely. Simon, thanks a lot for your time. I really appreciate it, mate. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Sounds great, Adrian.
Cheers, mate.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
To the Black Heart Red Spade podcast. For more information, please visit our website at www.blackheartredspade.com or follow us on Twitter at BeHeartRSpade.